now we talked about was stages of deception. And deception, let's say you have a strong belief. Let's say it's a strong moral belief, but it could be a strong belief about anything, even which hockey team is the best or which football team. Okay, so you start off with a strong belief, but then the first stage often includes something you'd call desensitization. You begin to become aware that there's a lot of other people have other beliefs about other football teams or about disagree with you on moral principles. And in fact, if it becomes generally accepted, some say position on morality becomes generally accepted in your culture and it differs quite a bit from yours, what happens is that at first you might have found it shocking, but with time you sort of get used to it. That's called desensitization. You get used to it, and what happens then is what we might call normalization. It becomes normal to you. This becomes just a part of the world that you live in. And along with that, when you compare that with your initial belief, something else is often common in this road to deception, and that is a confusion about what actually is true. It might be a confusion or a lack of an uncertainty about maybe which soccer team is the best, or it might be a confusion about, let's say in our culture today, a whole area of sexual morality. There's been a huge change in the last half century. So people went into this, say from my age, they went into this with a very clear set of moral beliefs. But then in our society today, that's become a different set has been normalized, and we're being consistently desensitized to that. So it seems ordinary, it seems common, it's everywhere. And then the question can be raised, well, what is actually the true belief in this area? For example, I saw this past week a discussion on, it was again something to do with sexuality in Christian circles, and the person said there are a range of beliefs in this. Well, that statement right there can cause confusion or uncertainty. A range of beliefs, and the reason that it is, and this is part of counteracting deception, is the assumption we unconsciously make when we hear that. When someone says there's a range of beliefs on this issue, there's actually another statement added to that, and it's there's a range of beliefs on this issue, and they are all of equal weight. Now, if they actually said that, you would have instantly, well, wait a sec here, I disagree type of thing. But when it's left unstated, it's left as a poison arrow, so to speak, a poison dart that takes time to work within you. And so then the person went on to say, this is the theology on this is fuzzy or uncertain,
open for debate,
up for debate.
But you're not actually allowed to debate it.
It creates, the whole idea is to create confusion on what you thought you believed to be true. And once that confusion has been introduced, coupled with normalization of whatever the new thing is, then the next stage is what we might call unconscious acceptance. You actually get so used to it and you've been so normalized and desensitized to what you once thought was terribly wrong, but now you're just totally used to it, is that you just start living in that situation without even realizing you've unconsciously accepted. You're not resisting anymore. Let's put it that way. There's very little resistance. You might say, well, I could see that and I could see this. And at that point, you're neutral and maybe leading towards still drifting towards the cultural norm, the new norm. And then the final stage of deception is conscious acceptance. This is when you become aware that, hey, I'm fine with this. And that's the final stage of deception. Now, this is not meant to be a rigorous and exhaustive breakdown on the stages of deception, because that field itself could be broken down in subdivisions and more added to it.
Yeah, I was thinking just in terms of something I'd add, which you see a lot of today, is affirmation. Mm-hmm. So you not only need to accept it, you need to affirm it, and need to go to that next step where, regardless of what your beliefs are, you have to say that they're right in their beliefs.
Well, okay, I would throw something else into the mix. Definitely, this affirmation could be a next step where you actually say, "Yeah, I'm not only fine with this, but I think this is a good idea," type of thing, or "This is where we need to go." And that, but there's also coercion, and coercion enters into the mix as well. Coercion actually it can be involved in deception, but it'd be an earlier stage, or when it's coerced into accepting or affirming something, and that is part of the desensitization process. So that eventually you've been coerced to do this, and then eventually you're fine with it. And now, kind of a semi-related example would be the Stockholm syndrome, where a person is kidnapped, for example, and at first they're just terrified and not at all in agreement with what's been done. Let's say they've been kidnapped by an activist group, as in the case of, I think it was Patty Hearst in California back in, I think it was the 70s, where eventually she joined the group. They joined the activist group in spite of the fact of how she was initially treated. That's a Stockholm syndrome, and that can be a form of deception as well. The deception actually unfolds in a variety of ways. It can be just hearing the same thing over and over and over again. And that's a very crude form, but it is very effective.